Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host.
Quiet on the set.
Today, we're talking about Long Bright River, the 8-episode limited series currently streaming on Peacock. The show is based on the 2020 novel written by Liz Moore and stars Amanda Seyfried as a Philadelphia police officer investigating a series of murders. My guest today, making his second appearance here on Below the Line, is Matthew Barber, who served as film editor and associate producer on the show. Matt, it's great to see you again.
Good to see you too, Skid. And Gianni too.
Yeah, you've cued in our audience. Also joining us today as co-host is Gianni Damaia. Gianni, you've read the book this series is based on, correct?
I have, and I have it right here, just in case I needed to flip through. Not that I'd be able to find any notes related to what we were talking about. But
I see someone who was a teacher's pet here. Yeah.
yeah. I'm just trying to suck up to Matt's.
All right, well, you have an advantage. I don't on that, but I have watched the entire show. Listeners, you're going to go watch the entire show as well before listening to our conversation because it will contain spoilers. But to start us off, Matt, talk to me about your role on this show and how you got involved.
I was primarily an editor. I was also brought on as an associate producer, which is helping out here and there with some of the other editorial needs. I also served as a second unit director for some pickups and things. And I've been working with Nikki Toscano, who was the showrunner and who sort of co-created the series with Liz Moore. I've worked with her for years, and she's like a really dear friend of mine. So anytime there's a show that she has, I'm the first person she calls for post.
So, Matt, you were aware of the show then as it was coming together, it sounds like. Now, there's going to be a lot of comparisons made between this and Mare of Easttown, which has sort of a similar female police officer approach to some small town activity. To what degree was the shadow of that show recognized in preparing this one?
Well, I mean, and full disclosure, I haven't seen Mare of Easttown yet. And what was interesting is Long Bright River was in development. It was cast. It was getting ready to go when Mare came out. And then that's sort of everyone was like, "Oh, well, this is a little too close." And Mare of Easttown is like three words. Long Bright River is 3 words. So for that reason, I mean, I wasn't privy to those conversations, but I know they decided to delay it for a while. And then some of the attachments fell away, and then eventually Amanda joined the cast, and that's sort of when it came back up. But there were some other like little shifts, like they changed the character. Like in the book, there's a grandma, and now in the series, it's a grandpa. G-Pop, who was G Mom, and that was G-Pop. And we got a great John Doman for that role. But yeah, that's as far as I can comment on the Mare of Easttown like shadow.
Speaking about the book, when you came into the orbit of this, had you already read the book, or did you make a point of reading the book, or did you avoid the book as you kind of approach something fresh? What's your take on the relationship to the written material?
I hadn't read the book, and I listened to the audiobook when once this show started, got the second revival, and it became a for sure thing. So then I listened to the audiobook just to sort of familiarize myself with the source material. Depending upon the show I'm on, I will look at the source material. Sometimes I won't. And I found that this time, in some ways, that helps because I sort of, know what I knew where the changes were. And because we did a lot of changes from the source material, which was heavily leading into Nikki's internal monologue. And so we were able to learn a lot about the mystery and her past through her inner monologue. But Liz and Nikki decided not to use monologue or voiceover in the series. So having listened to the audiobook, I was able to go like, okay, I understand why they made this shift here and what they're trying to go for in this flashback scene, in this look, in this other character's dialogue, which was sort of set up to illuminate what the book did so well with her inner monologue.
That actually segues perfectly into kind of my first thought about the series, because I was thinking thinking back to when I read the book, which I had read for a book club. I think it was 2 years ago, but so forgive me if I'm not exactly accurate, but in remembering the book and how a lot of the tension and drama is kind of derived from a lot of those lingering thoughts that Mickey has in regards to the flashbacks and remembering a lot of the things of her past, it seemed like the edit was then responsible for that character coming through in the show. Did you feel the responsibility of trying to like influence those flashbacks into those scenes? Was that written into the script, or were those kind of ideas fluid as you kind of went through it and navigated it?
Yeah, good. I mean, good question. We definitely, a lot of it was written into the script, and the way that Nikki and Liz sort of built the TV series was to try to like shine a spotlight on her inner world in other ways. But where as it relates to post production, we spent a lot of time, especially in the pilot, just getting the flashbacks right, because the engine of this piece is the modern mystery, like who's killing these women. That is the engine, and then the past is all set up to understand how she got here. So to be able to keep the tension going when we went into a flashback was a bit of a challenge. There are times that we cut to a flashback and we're just like, yeah, we've lost a little bit of momentum here, because we don't really know how this relates to the present. So to keep that tension going was finding in post, like not only like the right placement. We play around with a lot of placements where these flashbacks go, but even how much we showed, how linear we were, or how many, or when we deconstructed and did jump cuts and things. So there was a lot of playing with flashbacks.
Now, Matt, which episodes were you personally responsible for editing?
1, 5, and 8.
1, 5, and 8. And so, as we've talked about before, part of your responsibility then is to set a tone or temperament for the entire series with that first pilot episode, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, I've cut many pilots, and the challenge with like a limited series is that in a traditional TV, like former network television, you'd have a pilot. That's it. You just be like, we have pilot time. We have 6 weeks. We're just focusing on one show, and then the network either approves it or doesn't approve it. And if they approve it, great, you're off to the races. You have a template. But in these modern shows, especially in limited series, we're filming all 8 episodes with no breaks. So I was in the process of discovering, the tone of the show while other pieces were going and shooting. And so it was a little bit of like, we're playing, catch up all the time and playing around with tone and trying to influence and communicate with the directors of the 2, 3, and 4, and making sure they would gain the pieces that they needed.
To capitalize a little bit on the comment about the tone, I'm curious how fluid those conversations were in your approach to the edit itself, because the show does feel like it kind of maneuvers through a lot of different tonalities, for lack of a better term. That it's very harsh tension and suspense and mystery that sort of pulls the audience in. But then it's also balancing it with a very delicate family drama that I think lingers and permeates throughout the whole thing. Did you feel like you were constantly getting swept too much in one and then had to pull back and lean towards the other? Or what was that sort of juxtaposition like in your balancing act of it?
We definitely looked at that a lot because, with the book, you have time to breathe, right? And then you can feel some of the, warmer moments in the monologues and the inner dialogue with Mickey. But once you started putting them up on screen, the whole thing felt super dark and heavy. And it's a dark, heavy show, But there was always like this lightness, this family theme that ran through the book, and we really wanted to capture that in the series as well. So there was definitely dialing up and dialing down, like some of the moments to make them feel a little more warmer, especially around Thomas and Mickey, and she, between like Amanda, the way she played it, and how Nikki and Liz wrote it, they leaned into more of the warmth early on, which I think if you read the book, like she's like, Mickey's just like super, cold to Thomas, like, this is the harsh reality. I'm preparing you for this life. But there were some moments where we just like, and the kid Callum who plays Thomas he was so good. He was probably the best child actor I've ever worked with. He just nailed it. He lived the character, and I'm just like, whoa, who is this kid? He just has it. So it made it that much easier to sort of like lean into it and make it a little bit warmer than I think the book initially had.
Matt, before we go deeper into the sort of the specifics of that episode 1, which we've agreed we're going to talk about in detail, I want to talk about music on this show. It's a plot theme through the story. There's certainly a thematic element that I'm assuming comes from the book about classical music and her playing the French horn and what that means to her. And there's also how you applied that in the show itself. Can you tell me where your head was around music with this show?
Well, first of all, it's an English horn, which I didn't even know was an instrument until the show, right? But yeah, it was. This was something I was really like. Liz was very passionate about, and Liz grew up listening to a lot of this music that Mickey listened to, and we actually had a number of pieces that were written into the scripts that we couldn't make work. We had this whole Leonard Bernstein opening in the original pilot script, which that was interlaced with some classical music, and it didn't quite. It was while it was fun, it didn't quite have the gripping mystery that we really wanted, but that did feather in and out throughout the rest of the series. And wherever I could in post, I would try to find little moments to have like classical music playing in the background, just to paint that story that Liz so brilliantly wrote in the book.
I think just to shout out my personal favorite match cut that you do is actually in the last episode when you play that very famous classical song that I can't think of the name of right now, but as she walks into the church and you do the match cut of it was her mother's funeral, right? And then the match cut to her standing in the sort of decrepit placement of it. It's
Just everything's swelling.
yeah,
The strings are swelling.
yeah.
Oh man, yeah, all that stuff. It's great.
It felt like a real escalation of tension, and I mean, it was really, really beautiful use of music. Yeah, I was just curious if that was on the page or if that was something that you guys came up with in post.
That's something that we came up with in post because it was actually like earlier in the episode. There's a montage as Mickey's driving to confront Nicholas's character. Why am I blanking on his character right now?
Truman, is that right?
Truman.
Truman. I'm so in this new show that I'm in right now. Truman. Yeah, she's going to confront. She's tracking Truman. Meanwhile, Thomas is meeting Casey for the first time and playing her an album. So I created this whole montage with that piece of music, and then later on when she's in the church, I'm like, this would be a great time to call that back and just have that sort of thematic element there. So that was an idea we came up with in post.
Now, Matt, while we're talking about the scripted elements of the classical music, and thank you for the correction, the English horn throughout, there is also a contemporary music feel to this that I'm sure is intentional. I'd like you to talk more about the push and pull between these classical and contemporary elements.
This show takes place in like a few different locations, but one of the main locations is Kensington, like this Skid Row kind of situation in Philadelphia, which is a real location, which is Liz is really passionate about the people living on that street, and that we wanted to infuse the episode with this in the pilot with as much of that feel from the street. So when Mickey is patrolling, we have to have like music floating in and out. And we really wanted to try to get as many Philadelphia artists in there as possible. So we have like this montage where she's driving and listening. We hear this Tierra Whack song that's coming, and which is a local Philly artist. And that was an artist that our composer actually discovered for us, and it worked really well. And then I would throw stuff in there like we need a romantic montage. So I went on the internet. I'm like, who's Philly artists? And like, oh, Pink is from Philly. Great. All right. So I just would dive into Pink's music. I'm like, oh, this song would work really well. Throw it up, and Nikki loved it. Liz loved it. The studio loved it. So that was in. And then I do like I have another like of my friend's niece, this Princess Nostalgia. She's from Pittsburgh, which I know is not Philly, but I'm just like, yeah, it's in the same state. So I got a couple of her songs in there. So I was trying to get as much, at least as close to the area as possible, whenever possible.
That actually brings up an interesting point because the romance with Truman is one of the bigger deviations from the actual book itself, if I recall. And the way I kind of read it in the way you depicted in the show was the influence of that very contemporary pop song in that scene where they actually finally like sort of kiss, for real for the first time, it kind of reads as though everything that she had been doing in regards to classical music prior to, particularly in her relationship with her son, really does lend itself to that sort of rigid and sort of darker style of thinking that I think is so integral to Mickey's character. And then when the pop music comes in, it feels like it's bridging her the gap into the new person that Mickey could be, this happier, warmer, more kind-hearted person. Was that a conscious decision in when you guys were picking out the music specifically?
It wasn't, and a lot of times I find with music, sometimes when I consciously like this is going to be the theme. Sometimes it works, but sometimes there's just like an innate gut. It just it's like one of the things where it's like don't explain the art, just let the art feel. And it felt right. And whether it resonates with everybody else out there, all right, who knows. That's if it does, awesome. All I know is like it resonated with me. And I think what we were trying to do on this show, and with the encouragement of the network, was to bring as much warmth wherever possible, because this is so dark. And in many ways I'm glad we did, because I think it made the darkness that much darker, but also gave us a sense of hope. And the book eventually gets, it finds that there is hope. And I think it was important, especially to the network, that we always sort of never lost that sense of hope.
I'm going to take us into a deeper dive of episode 1. But to kick us off, Matt, give me a sense of the role the director plays with you in the editing process when you do have Liz Moore, the writer and co-creator, along with Nikki in her role. How does the director fit into that, and what was your relationship with the director on this show?
Yeah, this is Hagar Ben Ashar. This is my first time working with her. She created this series called Bad Boy, which was about this kid in an Israeli prison. And it was incredibly moving. And she has a real sensitivity towards kept trying to capture the authenticity of a character, and it was really important to her that the women in this series weren't looked down upon. They weren't objectified. They weren't just pawns, to drive the story. That the lens was always looking from a caring point of view of the women on the street. And I could see her sensitivity within her, her other work. And I was just like, this is the right person for the show. Now, the challenge with television directing is you are always servicing the vision of the showrunner, right? And because I have a long-standing relationship with Nikki, I sort of know what she wants and needs a lot of time. So when I'm working with a director especially on the first episode, but on all episodes, it's like there's a little bit of tension for me, which is like I know where we have to go, but it's also I have to be here for the director's vision and give them the full pass. And so sometimes I'll be like, I'll interject and be like, Nikki may not want this, and the director sometimes take it, sometimes doesn't. And Hagar's the same way. Like sometimes she's like, well, it's okay. Let's just play. And it's part of the process. And sometimes I don't even like to use the term right. Sometimes what I suggest works, sometimes it doesn't, and it's all part of that sort of discovery process. And with each subsequent pass, we're like diving in, honing the character, honing the world, honing the tone. There's an elegance to Hagar's work too, and I love elegant cutting. But then eventually, like this show is gritty, so we had to start breaking it apart and taking it apart and chopping it up and getting that sort of more docudrama energy in there to keep the drive going.
Now, Matt, it's not to take us too far away from episode 1, but Hagar was also the director on episode 5, which you also edited. And so does that rhythm of what you guys learned on that first episode, was it back and forth between these two, or did you guys have a different relationship with episode 5?
I think there was definitely a shorthand by that point. And so I sort of knew what worked for Hagar, but I also knew because I'd been doing a few passes with Nikki. I also knew what Nikki wanted. And because the schedule we had was so crazy, they gave us a really tight schedule. There was a lot more, I think, quick decisions where it was like, hey, I know you probably want this. This is probably where we're going to go. Here's a couple versions. Let's And most of the time, I think Hagar knew at that point. She goes like, okay, it's fine. Let's just do what's best for the show.
Were you editing as you guys shot?
Yeah.
Wow.
I start day 2. They start filming day 1. I'm editing day 2.
Wow.
And during the first month of the pilot, it's nice. It's a nice lax schedule. But once you get to episode 5, I'm like, we're giving notes on episode 1. I'm cutting dailies on episode 5. Nikki's bouncing around because she's dealing with 4, and she also directed her first episode of television, episode 6. So she was prepping for that. So it was crazy, especially for Nikki.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I can only imagine where your head is being in 9 different places at once while you're going through it. But did you feel it kind of gave you a sense of security because you're watching this thing as it's actually being finalized? You're pretty much, I mean, you and Nikki, I'm sure, are pretty much the only people that kind of have the keys to the kingdom in that way. So did you feel a little bit more confident in then going back to set and being like, okay, well, I can see exactly how this is going to cut together?
Yes and no. I mean, it's always a scramble when you're filming. Doesn't matter how seasoned the team is or how much work the director's done, how much money would be thrown at. There's always a scramble. We're always at. It's like filmmaking is like a goldfish, right? The bigger the bowl, the bigger the scope. It just keeps going bigger. So the problems get bigger, but there's still problems. So, but for the indie film, it's like tiny, but there's still problems. So how we handle the problems and how we approach the problems are I think show the skill and the magnitude is the wrong word, but just shows the caliber of the crew and the team that's leading it.
Pivoting a little bit because I do want to talk about something that you did in episode 1, or a very conscious sort of change. So I mean, in coming from the book, it's not right out the gate, but it's pretty much from the outset, I would say page 20 or so, that that Casey is her sister. But you guys kind of play that card very close to your chest. And it's not the only secret that you're keeping in editing this first episode, but I'm curious how that sort of came to fruition, how it was informing your decision making in terms of how much you're really relying on those flashbacks, because obviously Casey has the sort of like iconic pink hair look in this, so you do have at least some sort of visual representation that you're calling the audience back to. But talk us through some of that stuff.
First of all, the pink hair was a bit of a challenge because the first murder that happens, the girl has pink hair as well, and so we had to we had to be able to tell the story that this woman could be Casey who was killed, but eventually it wasn't Casey. But then who was his pink hair, and all the women kind of looked the same, and that's part of the gimmick. But then it kind of gets confusing about who's what, where, when, why. So we spent a lot of time just honing that in post and giving like one girl a scar so we knew who was we could see the scar, all this stuff. But as far as the sister reveal, like, yeah, I can't really comment on why they chose to hold back on that in the script, other than like I think they just wanted to drive us into the second episode, like this mystery, like waiting for this emotional reveal at the end of episode 1. Now that flashback for revealing the sister, that was actually in a different place in the script. It was a little bit later. It was like just one scene later. But I was cutting this flashback where I'm getting the story mixed up, because the flashback I was referring to was the one that her sister was the one who overdosed. She kept having this flashback of an overdose,
right.
An overdose.
Which you do have clips of in that first episode.
Yeah. Who is this person? Who is this person? Mixed in, there was this other scene where she's telling Truman that she's my sister. And they were 2 separate flashbacks. At the time, this was about a little bit over a year ago. I was going through some really personal shit in my life, and part of my life was sort of falling apart. I was going through a breakup, and I'm cutting this scene, and I'm just like, it's not working. These 2 pieces aren't working. And so then I had this inspiration of like, the whole idea of that moment is Mickey saying, I have to let my sister, I have to let her go. I have to let this person go. Like, I can't keep rescuing her. I have to let her go. I realized as a personal moment, like that's what I'm doing in my own personal relationship. And Hagar had sent me this beautiful piece of music that we didn't use. It was our temp piece. And I just was like, oh my God, these two flashbacks have to go together. Can we do, like, first of all, can we do a flashback within a flashback? That's bonkers. But I cut it together, and in that moment I realized, oh, I'm going through a breakup, and I just started bawling. I just started bawling in this room, in that cutting room, as my life is falling apart. But I still wasn't sure if it would work, because like it's a little bonkers to do a flashback within a flashback. But I showed it to Hagar, and Hagar was just like, "This is." She was emotional. And Nikki, to this day, every time that comes up on the screen, she just starts crying. So whatever, I didn't set out to intentionally like make a piece that was was memorializing my breakup, with my ex, but that emotional space just sort of came through. And I just went with it. I'm like, I channeled some kind of emotion. I'm like, that is what this feels like. And that's what this moment needs to feel like. These pieces with this music, I don't know why it works. It just works.
Yeah. It also gives you, I'm sure, some freedom in regards to editing the subsequent episodes in the series that you handled, because you established that, we can break whatever rule we want, really. It's like there's a flashback within a flashback. Who knows what we can do? But you know what I mean? Did you feel like you had that level of freedom after you did that, or that's just not even on the radar? It's just whatever the scene.
I always have that level of freedom. Whether it works, I'm just like, that's one thing I love about editing is I have a solution. I have a solution to this. It may not work. It may not be great. We can just throw paint at the wall. We can try anything. And we're only limited by, how much carpal tunnel we have, right? Oftentimes, I've been doing this long enough to know that like this is a scene that will probably play straight. But this scene, we can break it up into like 5 different ways and do it like this. But sometimes there's some magic about like being a young editor or a young filmmaker, not really understanding the rules and saying, screw it, we're just gonna do this, and sometimes magic happens. So every once in a while, when things are really hard, when things aren't working, I just like, look at it and just go, let's just flip this upside down and see what happens.
Well, Matt, go deeper with me on the opening scenes of this episode 1 as well, because here we don't have the benefit of our primary cast. We've got supporting cast, but the weight of establishing what this show is going to feel like, it seems like quite a challenge. And while there's some specific elements that jumped out to me, start with what you were thinking of in putting this together, what you're trying to accomplish, and then what worked to make it what it is.
That opening went through so many iterations. It was a real challenge to get it just right. Like I said, there was originally like this Leonard Bernstein, narration that was going on, which was an album that Mickey used to listen to as a kid. And so then we come to find out later that this was the album that she listened to, that she was playing for Thomas. There's a little bit of a hanging Chad, you can hear it when we come back into that reveal of Thomas in the parking lot. It's still there. But it just didn't quite capture the mystery of the show, because it's the first thing. It's the first thing, it's got to set the tone. And we have to really sort of set the stakes of these women being murdered. So it was really about like making sure, first of all, that we cared about these women, that we see them in their state and have some empathy for them. And we see this woman wake up next to her boyfriend, and we did like a little misdirect. We wanted to make it feel like, oh, she's camping. We hear some birds. It's lovely. It's two lovers in a tent. She kisses them goodbye, and then we slowly start to reveal, which is where that like we have that like the forest mural that was kind of like opening up the things like, oh, it's a forest. No, it's not a forest. It's it's an encampment. And as she walks through, we start to reveal that, and we see her go to to get this free donut from the store clerk. And the whole idea of it was like, feel her world, feel some empathy. Like, yes, she is a sex worker, and she's a human being. That was the primary focus. And then the villain comes in to come and kidnap her and kill her. So that was like capturing those two tones, like empathy and then mystery.
When you talk about that corner shop, that echoes, I believe it's in the final episode, again, with the corner shop. When you're editing that first sequence, are you already thinking about, yeah, this is going to have to, resonate at the very end of the show as well? Or are you like, you know what, we have to accomplish this, and then is it episode 8 that comes back and says, let's try to apply it now here, what we've already established?
That was something that Nikki and Liz really, really wanted to do, was to have an echo. So it was written into the script to have it as an echo of the first episode. Now, initially, we shot a lot of the pieces very, very similar, but once we got the final scene on its feet, it was too much. We didn't need all of it. We just needed a few. We just need like a little wink and a nod. So we shaved it down to just the bare bones. But basically, you said like, this is the same person, and this is the women reclaiming their power in this space.
Something else that I think episode 1 is really tasked with is, and excuse me, this is spoilers for the whole show, but you've already been warned by Skid once, but
I've already spoiled it.
Yeah. But you're tasked with masking that Lafferty is ultimately the main killer. Was that a severe challenge in regards to how much or how little you're cutting to him? Is one lingering shot just a little bit too long? You're shaving off a half a millisecond, or talk us through that.
Yeah. There was a lot of talk about that, because the great thing about him as an actor, but also as a character, is like to play up this, like, he's just as like bumbling the newbie, but we really wanted to feel like what he was processing and his fear around it all was because he was new to this, and he was uncomfortable. But really, he was uncomfortable on the scene because he was the murderer, right? So there was a lot of discussion about what kind of look, and how far to go, and sometimes we just cut out reactions altogether just because it became far too obvious. So it was definitely a delicate balance.
There's another red herring that you put in this first episode, and it's the same red herring that's there in the book as well. But and I'm blanking on the character's name, I apologize, but the homeless man, or you perceive him as homeless, and then is revealed to be an abuser in a sort of domestic violence situation. There's another like very sort of quick shot nod to, there could be another, sort of third party here. Was that, also a sort of conscious decision? Did you have to, remove or add any sort of milliseconds on either end of that?
Yeah, we actually added more to that, because we really wanted to sort of highlight this was a possibility, and I mean, and this was all sort of the engine of the book and the engine of the scripts, and I just did what I could to sort of help, to help shape that.
Now, what other challenges are there in that first episode of establishing these characters and their various relationships? We talked some about the reveal with her sister, but there's also the introduction of Truman, right, which happens through flashbacks. And these elements are complicated, but again, you have to be thinking about the entire show, not just this episode standing on its own.
One of the challenges was also we revealed Truman in the flashback, so to get that the timing of that right and reveal enough, but also it's a lot of dialogue and exposition, so we had to trim it up a little bit. But that's where finding the Tierra Whack, who's the local rap artist, who drove the energy for that scene, really helped. Truman is such a lovable character. We just really wanted to make sure that we fell in love with him, and that we saw how much he cared about the characters as well, and how much he influenced Mickey as she, was learning how to do this job.
I apologize if this is off track or if it doesn't apply to the episode 1, but you had mentioned that you wore a couple of different hats on the series, and I'm just curious. Do you want to take this moment now to claim any ownership over any directorial shots that you were responsible for as second AD? We won't tell anybody.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, I flew out to do a second unit day, and I've done a fair amount of directing, and they needed some help. So I was the logical choice because I know the show and I'm DGA. But we had this massive sequence when they find Simon getting the blowjob in the alley, where she thinks he's could be the killer, and he's killing her, and that sequence needed a lot of extra pieces. Hagar wasn't available, so I came out to shoot some extra pieces for that. Now there was an extensive plan for all these different bits, and then this massive lightning storm hit New York, which is where we were filming, and it was like we had to evacuate. We had to go into the buildings. We had like 2 hours to film, which was supposed to be an 8-hour shoot. So, so I ended up just filming a couple little bits of a blowjob.
The abbreviated version.
Yeah.
Because of the
My
thunderstorm.
claim to fame. Mom, you're so proud of me.
Well, Matt, stepping back from the series overall, how do you think it came together? What do you want people to take away from this limited series?
Well, I mean, I think what really moved me about this, and is what also moved Hagar about this, and I think it's what moved Liz and Nikki about this, is like the care of these women living on the street, of these unhoused folks, and these sex workers, that they're humans, that they're people, and that whatever we could do to like bring some more empathy and some more humanity to that. And also, I mean, look, police they're also humans too, and they're complex human beings. There's some people that are total, D-bags, and there's some people that have big hearts. The series sort of highlights that. It doesn't make, the police force is corrupt, but there's also some really amazing cops who are looking out for these women as well. Not just Mickey. The people living on the street are also humans as well. So I think for me, that's what I love about this show. I love what Hagar did. I love what Nikki and Liz did for that reason. And also what like the love that Amanda brought to this character as well.
Agreed. Well, on that note, we're going to call it a wrap. Oh, Matt, I'm so glad you came back to talk about this. Great seeing you.
Oh, good to see you too, Skid. And Gianni, don't be a stranger.
I won't. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time, man. It was a blast.
Listeners, I always appreciate your feedback. You'll find my contact info at our website, belowtheline1word.biz. That's B-I-Z. You'll also find past episodes and links to all our social media, so check it out. Matt, where next are we going to see your work?
My next work will be on Amazon in probably 2026. I can't reveal the title of the show yet because it's under wraps, but it stars Octavia Spencer and Hannah Waddingham. It's action comedy. It's a blast. It's a blast.
We're going to watch for it, and we will expect you back.
I'll be back. Don't worry. As long as Gianni's here.
Yeah.
Teacher's pet success, indeed, Gianni.
Listen, if it's based on a book I've read for a book club, or if Hannah Waddingham is in it, then I will absolutely do that.
Closing credits, thanks to Curtis Five for our music, John Wan for our logo, and to all of our listeners, I appreciate you. The Below the Line logo is available on t-shirts, mugs, and stickers at redbubble.com. I'm continuing our season-long promotion. If you send me a picture of yourself in a Below the Line t-shirt, I'll thank you by name on the podcast. Other ways you can help the show. First, give us a positive rating wherever you get your podcast. Second, share a positive review with your friends, because that's how new listeners find the show. All of that aside, whatever your engagement, the fact that you're still listening means a lot to me. Thanks again from Below the Line.